Hi, everybody. This is Micah Lieberman once again coming to you with a video. Often the way these videos come about is I'm talking to somebody and I say, oh, that was interesting. Can we record that? So everybody, this is Dan Kearney. Dan and I just saw each other at DIA. Dan basically has a site network, CNS Healthcare, but he also built a CTMS platform for sites called Centric. So he's got a long history in the world of sites. We know each other through SCOPE, my conference in the US. Before this call, I tried to talk him into coming to Europe, SCOPE Europe in October. And I think they're on ClinEco too. I hope so. I should know this stuff. But anyways, it doesn't matter. Everybody, this is Dan Kearney. Dan, how are you, man?
I'm great, Micah. Thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, good. And by the way, I told him to close his blinds because it was too nice and pretty outside and I don't want people to feel bad. So, okay. So Dan and I, one of the conversations we had last week, we have to make it rated G, so we're actually we sound professional and we're not complaining because we want to actually find solutions and everybody wants to move clinical research forward. You and I talked about fragmentation. Fragmentation in the industry. Sometimes it's too much technology. Sometimes it's the burden on the site, the investigator, and downstream on the patient. There's many reasons that this is a problem. So why are we talking about fragmentation still? I thought interoperability was the word 20 years ago, and we're still talking about fragmentation. So what does that mean? What does fragmentation mean? Then let's talk about why it's a problem.
Well, from a site perspective, the fragmentation, in my opinion, means how many outside vendors with their own platform are associated with each one clinical trial that starts up. And on average, when you see somewhere between 15 and 17 outside vendors with one single trial, the burden on the site, the study coordinator, principal investigator, regulatory people, the burden is astronomical. Keeping up with passwords, ever-changing passwords, keeping up with the platform, getting emails nonstop from vendors asking you to complete training for a study, but they don't mention the protocol that's in the study. It's just very, very disjointed. And I think it's because there are far too many providers, solution providers that are entering the space who probably don't have enough experience at a site or maybe have never even been to a site to walk in their shoes to figure out what's really going on. That's
Right.
my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's rated G, but I think it's very honest. I think people know this. I think instinctively people know this. However, there's still a lot of trials.
Yep.
There's still a lot of need. There's still a shortage of investigators, a shortage of sites, a shortage of patients. So I don't know if this is necessarily going to change.
I don't think it will either. I think that there are some upcoming solution providers. I'll give a plug to the IQVIA One Home that they're rolling out at this point
Good.
now. It's a great starting point for platforms that are built on a mission of trying to simplify the life of site personnel. If they have a single sign-on for one platform that feeds to all of those other platforms that are associated with that trial, that's going to save yourself multiple minutes per day, if you will. And that might not seem like a lot, but over the course of a year, it adds up to a ton. And that's also one of the reasons why we designed our own CTMS platform, started on it 17 years ago and refined it 3 years ago. And now it's out for commercial use.
Right. Because you came from a different angle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thanks for that plug. I think our buddies at IQVIA will appreciate it. I think it is hard though. So here's another thing is if we're speaking to our friends in the CRO world, we're speaking to our friends in pharma, and they know this. They do know this, but at the same time, sometimes these organizations are set up by a specific trial, or maybe they're set up by a therapeutic area and you have different groups. Sometimes each of those groups have their own procurement department that's separate. So what would you tell them? That's understanding that reality, that there's trials starting at different times. There's multiple kind of trains leaving the station with their own budgets. Maybe certain providers are better at certain therapeutic areas or indication and have certain skills, and that group at that CRO or that pharma wants to hire them and not them. Are we pushing back on that, pushing towards the idea of fewer providers? Doesn't that just favor the big players and consolidation?
It does.
And does that quash innovate? I don't know. I think I'm speaking out of two sides of my mouth at this, you know.
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael. I don't think that there is a simple solution to this, but I think the more that we talk about it and push back with pharma and CROs when we can, to remind them that the end user is the most important user, because that's where your data is coming from. Without patients, without sites, you don't have patients. And if we complicate their jobs on a daily basis, we're going to lose good sites and good study coordinators because they just give up. There's too many options. And I guess the one thing, if I had a magic ball, I would encourage pharma CROs, solution providers, to take a step back and think, okay, we need a EDC platform. We need a patient recruitment platform. How do we bring on a patient recruitment vendor and a data entry vendor and an e-source vendor who can all communicate with each other to make it simpler for the sites? Or do we let the sites use their own CTMS platform that they've either bought, they're using through a SaaS agreement, or they built on their own like we have, and through API interface in the back, make them interoperable that way too? And I know I'm no engineer, I'm no computer science guy. I know that that's easier said than done, but we've got to start getting to that point where systems communicate with other systems without losing data integrity, violating HIPAA, all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, this is a similar conversation we were having in healthcare. We still are, right?
We are. Absolutely.
Healthcare is the same. And so, okay, I think what you just said is probably represented by 6 or 7 panels at SCOPE in different forms, you know, in different
the one that I spoke at in February.
Yes, probably. So we have a long way to go. At the same time, these conversations are happening. And like I said, I spoke out of two sides of my mouth. I think I am seeing new players. I am seeing small innovators with a different angle. Sometimes they get bought up and absorbed by a big player, and that's fine. So I think there's always this churn, and the technology is moving forward, but we do have to we have to keep our eye on the ball, is your point of who is your customer? Ultimately, who is your customer? We talked about at our meetup. Jimmy Bechtel from SCRS helped us with at ClinEco at a recent, meetup, a ClinEco Connect, which are just these really informal kind of virtual breakouts. We talked a lot about this, and I don't think this is going away, but I think we have to keep talking about it in mixed company, meaning the CROs have to be at the table, pharma has to be at the table, the investigators, all of it, because we all agree we don't want investigators quitting. We need more sites, not fewer. We need more patients, not fewer. All right, cool. All right, Dan, this is great, man. Thanks. I think I was worried we were going to sound dark and negative, but
I pulled it off, Micah. I pulled it off.
I think we're good. I think we're okay. I think, yeah. And this conversation will continue and continue and continue. I think, yeah, for sure. So, Dan, good seeing you. Thanks for hanging out.
Thanks, Mike. I greatly appreciate it.